Okay, welcome everyone. Wow, talk about an on-time group. This is fabulous. It's so great. Thank you all for being here. We have a lot to cover today, and my apologies again for not getting an agenda out to you sooner, but things are moving fast, and I know you all feel that. So I know you all bear with me. So before I get into the opening round of introductions, I just want to really emphasize this is not MDP, this is the governor's initiative. It's part of the economic competitiveness EO. And so I really need all of you as this whole interagency coordinated effort. We just happen to be who's staffing it, and I'm named to be chairing it. But this is really no egos here. This is not any one agency. This is all of us working together to grow the economy. So I really appreciate everyone being here. Jen, I know you're online. We'll go and do an opening round and you can weigh in there. But we have the agenda. We have a few materials in front of you. I wanted you all to know what we've been told is the official roster of folks. Hi, Joe. You should be, where are you? You're over here. Oh, yeah. And so that is the roster as I know it of who is on this council. And so if anybody knows if that's changing in any way, let me know and we will put your primary designee on there. So this is what I'm going to be following based on what we received back. The other thing you should have in front of you is the agenda for today. And then you have a copy of the executive order in front of you also. You should have, and then we'll also have sort of our cool sheet of some of the projects that are coming forward. And so we'll be using all of those. And then this is being recorded because these are open meetings. So just so that everyone's aware of that. So with that, we are just going to go ahead and do an opening round of introductions of the council members. And I will start with Secretary Coker.
Good afternoon, Harry Coker, Secretary of Commerce. Delighted to be here and working with this key partnership. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, we'll go over to, it's not Jason, it's Mike.
No, it's Jason.
It is Jason.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Jason.
Yep. Good afternoon, Jason Mowbray. I'm the acting Maryland State Fire Marshal. Looking forward to the opportunity to have this dialogue and discussion and see where we can go.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason. And our newly Tom Sadowski.
Yes. Tom's alter ego. Good afternoon, everyone. Donnie James, Director of Portfolio and Asset Management at Medco.
It's Donnie.
Yes, DONNY.
Okay,
James.
James, great. Thank you. Wonderful. Thanks for being with us, Donnie.
Good afternoon, everybody. Julia Glanz, Deputy Secretary at DHCD.
Good afternoon, Suzanne Dorsey, Maryland Department of the Environment. I'm the Deputy Secretary.
Great. And I am Rebecca Flores, Secretary of Maryland Department of Planning, and your chair that's somehow going to navigate us through all of this over here.
Hi, Dave Gosselin. I'm not Josh Cripps. I'll embarrass him. Today's his 40th birthday, so he's celebrating that. So I sitting in for him today.
Is following the governor's instructions that no one's supposed to work on their birthday. Good luck with that, but good for you.
Good afternoon, Joe McAndrew, Assistant Secretary at the Maryland Department of Transportation.
Oh, thanks.
Hi, everybody. Marcy Jacobs. I'm a Deputy Secretary with Do It and the Chief Digital Experience Officer for Maryland.
Great.
Mike Hawkins. I'm the Assistant Secretary of Maryland Department of Agriculture.
Cool. Thank you. And Jen, you want to introduce yourself online? Are you on mute? Okay. Jen Aosa is on virtual, and I'm sure she's listening. We're using Teams as a platform, and so we try to keep all the public participants muted so that we can really focus in on the council members. And so Sylvia's going to work on that. But Jen, thank you. Welcome. Oh, are you unmuted now? You might be to say hello to everybody.
I think I'm unmuted now. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Aosa. I'm the Chief of Staff with the Maryland Energy Administration.
Great. Thanks for being here, Jen. Appreciate it. And I also want to introduce our MDP team because you're going to be hearing from them a lot. And so we'll start with Sylvia. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Sylvia Mosser, and I'm happy to be helping you guys out with the Permitting Council. I work in our research review and policy unit. So yeah, happy to meet you all.
She's a great utility player, so she's does it all. Darius,
Hello, everyone. Darius White, Community Design and Development for MDP. Happy to be here.
he's 1 week in at MVP, so learning fast, and will also be part of the support team for the council. And over to Mike Haxel.
Hello, my name is Mike Haxel, and I'm the manager of the Geospatial Data Analysis Unit.
Great, thanks, Mike. And Jason.
It's Jason Duval, Director of Research Review and Policy. Thank you.
Great. And Melanie.
Melanie Gross, Executive Assistant to the Secretary.
Well, and since we only have a couple other people, let's introduce you that are in what I call the galley. But go ahead. Louise, sir, go ahead.
I'm Elizabeth Hunt. I met a few of you last time. I'm Do It, and I work with Marcy.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Louise?
I'm Luis Cardona. I'm actually one of those permitting council members. And I am the director of the Governor's Office of Business Advancement at the Department of Commerce.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. It's great to have everybody in person. Are we good? Okay. So why don't you go through all of that just as sort of a little bit of housekeeping? Are we good? Oh, okay.
Come on down.
Go for it. Sylvia, let's go ahead to our next slide then. Oh, is that me or is that you? Okay. Okay, before the executive order. Okay, a couple more things. So we do have your calendar set up, invites starting in June. And when we get over to next steps on the agenda, we'll go ahead. Can you put the agenda slide up? Go back to that. Okay. So when we talk about next steps, we'll kind of go over how those meetings are going to run starting in June. We are skipping May because there's a lot to be done between now and then. But in terms of today, just a quick overview of the executive order, share with you some of our research findings. Today, we do have one action item, and that is specific to the project selection criteria, which will then give us a full green light to start having the working group vet projects. We have a few sneak previews today of some that have been submitted to just give you a sense of what that looks like. A few of the agencies are going to just share some of what they've been doing on their side of already, because obviously you all do this. It's how do we coordinate it, right? Just a real kind of overview of the fact that we're in really very conceptual stage of what the technology side of this might look like. We do have 4 appointed seats, so there are 4 more members that will be joining us. I can just mention that now, in that the EO specifically references both rural and urban, county and municipality, so that we have that local representation at the table from the beginning. Because as we all know, it takes a village, so it's not just the state, which is what we're focusing on, but to at least begin to have local entities, at the table with us. And then we may bring in project teams on occasion, or even a federal component once we select the projects that'll be part of this initial pilot. That'll become, I think, a little bit more clear, and then we'll just do next steps and timelines. So that's our plan for today. Let's go to the executive order first. We want to give you all a hard copy. Everything is on Teams. And so thank you, Marcy and Elizabeth, helped us ensure that everyone should have access to Teams in your agency, because that's what we'll use as our project platform for sharing materials and where we'll be posting everything. So there is a folder there where you will find information specific to the council. The working group also has a folder. And then, of course, I have an internal folder for our team, our MDP team. And Sylvia will help you if you run into any trouble in that after you leave this meeting. So there is an electronic version of this on the folder, and you have a hard copy. But to remind everybody, this is one section of that really big strengthening Maryland's business climate to bolster economic competitiveness EO that the governor signed back in December. So we are focused on section D, And with that focus, we essentially have a purpose, which is I tried to highlight key components. And it is about interagency coordination, efficient processing, advanced priority infrastructure and place-based projects. This starts on page 5 of that hard copy that you have in front of you. The whole idea is to bolster transparency, ensure predictability, and foster interagency coordination. So it's all there. But that is kind of our mission statement as a group of what it is we're trying to accomplish as our directive from the governor. That's what we need to somehow pull off in the next 14 months. So we will do it, believe. And so it's important that we are familiar with it and keep referencing it, because even today, the agenda kind of follows the various components of this executive order, because that is sort of our roadmap for what's expected of us and the actual deliverables and things that we need to do. And I'll get into pieces of that as we go through the presentation. But I actually wanted to reference Secretary Coker right now, because I know your agency is very much charged with a lot of the rest that's in there. Is there anything you want to share about the rest of it and what you all are doing with the group while we're here?
I'll just share that an executive order really just documents the collaboration that all the states have when it comes to economic development. I want to believe it's things we would have been doing, but now it's things that we are mandated to do, and that's whatever it takes. So again, happy to be a part of the partnership, not just with this one, but with other parts of the EO.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you being here today too, so that we can really figure out how do we do the big mantra, which is grow the economy.
Yep.
Going to take all hits on deck to do what we need to do in that regard. Absolutely. So thank you. So next slide, Sylvia, I'm going to let you operate over there if you don't mind. So again, solid in executive order. These are our core areas. Project eligibility criteria. That's what we're going to basically take action on today. There is a reference to an application process. Basically, right now, we've already been gathering potential projects, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. The coordination, a lot of the roll up the sleeves work will happen in the working groups and potentially project teams as subsets of that. The working group is where you all, with your agency, sometimes you will be serving on both if that's what your agency decides. But the working group should be the people, particularly once we select the pilot projects, because right now I know a lot of you have different permitting components. And so once the pilot projects are selected, you may know a little better who the right person is on the working group as we move that along. So that's another one of our duties, to create this online internal and external dashboard reporting. We are due to provide quarterly reports to the governor. Our first one will be due June 30th. And so the governor's office and the governor is able to keep track. Plus, I just reported out at the Economy Performance Cabinet a couple of weeks ago on what we're already doing here. So yeah. And processes for the working group. Basically, I need all of you. You'll notice in the executive order that it specifically says deputy secretary or equivalent. So we need folks around the table that are in a position to help ensure that your agency is engaged and, moving these things forward. So next slide, Sylvia. So the first thing we wanted to dig into is share with you a little bit about not only some of the work that's already happened, like through the Efficiency Commission, but what we learned about other places. What are they doing? How are they doing this? And so we wanted to share some of that with you first. Obviously, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We will learn what we can from others. We will be inventing some of the wheel here, though, based on what we found in our research. So let's go to that first slide. Fast 41, I was hoping to get Brad Fallon here to talk about this one, but he's obviously caught up in post-session duties in Annapolis. But I think basically when this started, and I was involved in writing the executive order, Brad was really leading the charge on this, as with others on the second floor. But they had looked at that Fast 41 model out of the federal government, and it was around the Transportation Act. So it was actually very focused on federal projects and a lot around transportation. But what it was starting to do, who knows where that'll move going forward, was a lot of what I think seeded some of the thought around what we could be doing here in Maryland, and in the initial stages of writing the executive order and trying to figure out how do we want to frame this. This was a model that we looked at. We also had some meetings with some of the Fast 41 people at that time last fall. So it is an interesting model, and they were just beginning to include the states. They had really only included really the federal side of the equation when we were talking with them last fall. Anybody have any experience with Fast 41 or anything you want to share about this one that you may have experienced? Yeah, there weren't. The states, I think we had 2 state projects that were starting to move into this model. I just did a Google search and it's still there. Will be interesting to see if it continues to be there on the website, and the federal website. So that kind of seeded a lot. Next slide is the Government Efficiency Commission. And I've actually asked Marcy to talk a little bit about that commission and the work that was done last year, of which this was also an outcome of. But Marcy, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you. Ozma, Mirza, and Manny had about 3 meetings at the end of last year that was really focused on the data call that came out of the Transparent Government Act. And there were some priorities that were set as part of that effort. I think that is restarting post-session. I've had a few conversations with Ozma and Manny, but that was looking across sort of the entire spectrum of permitting and licensing. So professional licensing, starting a new business, and then construction and building permitting. So that scope is, I think, much more broad. 1 or 2 of the 10 priorities, I think, would overlap the space that this council is focused on.
Yeah, that's great summary, Marcy. And I think that the thing is here, as we move along, we need to make sure all these things are also being coordinated, right? If there's work happening over in commerce or over in the efficiency or transparency or performance cabinets, the whole idea of this group is to ensure these things are being coordinated. We're not duplicating efforts or nothing's falling through the cracks, but this is not about, as you mentioned, licensing, and a lot of this included licensing and credentialing. This is more about projects, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the criteria section. But anybody who may have been involved in this, or any other comments about this effort that was undertaken last year?
I think it's up and running again, and we participated, I want to say, in 2 meetings now.
Okay.
Something about fleet efficiencies.
Yes.
So
shared
that's
fleet.
different. We might be talking about the BCG effort. That's a different efficiency effort through the governor's office. There's lots of efficiency happening at all levels.
Got it.
We'll define that in lots of ways. But yes, GEC was a smaller scope. There were 3 meetings that were kind of back to back, I think November, December timeframe, and they have not restarted so far as I know. And I've been talking with them quite frequently. I'm happy to share the report that came out of that.
That's all good.
The BCG effort, I think, is more like looking at how we're spending across the state and where can we consolidate. So like licenses or equipment or things that we're spending maybe in silos, but it shouldn't be.
Government modernization.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's good to have clarity here. Sylvia, I think that report I know is in Teams. Can we make sure that goes under the resources folder for the council? Because we do have that report. It's good to have as a reference for this group. But Joe, to your point, yeah, there's a lot of different efforts going on, and making sure we stay focused on our piece, but at least know about those others, and it's critical. So thank you for sharing that. So the next one I want to get to, and you'll see the report and everything, and really Sylvia's research. Sylvia did a lot of research, and we have as a final slide in this segment some of those other things. But the one that was particularly interesting, and appears to be the only one in the US that we have identified that is truly doing a cross-agency comprehensive approach that is similar to what we're doing here is Virginia. And they have stood, it's been about a 2-year process. Governor Youngkin took it on, and it's coming out of his office, but it's the Virginia Permit Transparency, VPT for sure. They hired a consultant. We actually talked to that consultant. We talked to the Virginia group, who were gracious to share with us their experience, which was really wonderful of them. And then we talked to their consultant yesterday and learned as much as we could about what was happening there. The consultant actually, hey, come on in, Tunji. Do you want, there's a chair down there if you'd like to sit there.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here. This group took a slightly, I want to give you a little bit of insight on this because I think it's the best one we have found that has any direct correlation with what we're doing and what their experience has been, because I think it'll help guide us. Now that Tunji has sat down, I'll let him introduce himself. Tunji, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Sure. I can't imagine they don't, but go ahead.
Sorry, I'm late. My name is Tunji Adenika. I'm one of the governor's policy advisors. I work with Deputy Chief of Staff Shana Hernandez. MDP is in my portfolio, but also MDEM, Emergency Management, MDOT, and housing. See Julia here, so sorry I'm late. Happy
Problem. I'm glad you could be here. So with Virginia, a few things. They've been at it about 2 years. They staged, we are sort of doing as per the executive order, a pilot set of projects. They staged it in by agency. So they did 3 agencies first. They did another 3, and they want to be up to 12 agencies by the end of this year, over a 3-year period. They have already documented and have metrics around the improvement that it's resulted in. I mean, to the extent that you can isolate that, as a direct correlation to this work. One of the things that really highlighted is transparency alone just really kicked up their numbers in terms of just, both sides of that equation, both the finger pointing at the state that actually wasn't the state, it was stuck somewhere else. And the state really realizing where all the pieces of the system were functioning in terms of being able to be transparent as it went through the system. So a lot to be learned, I think, from this particular example. And I'm thrilled that they've been so open in terms of having their conversations with us. Next slide, Sylvia. Is that there's a couple of comparatives there that we put together for you all. You can find more on their website. We are definitely going to be looking closer at this one. And then I think the other thing is that was really understanding their process. They started with assessing the agencies, not as an audit, but just what's going on now. What systems are they using, and how much variety there is of different types of systems. They basically created this phase 1, then they developed a plan and a cost estimate, and then they had to develop, obviously, the technical systems that would be needed for the internal and external facing. They also had a component about training the staff because, as we all know, we have to ensure that the people that are involved get on board and know how to use any of this coordinated system that will be created. And so a lot there. I updated when I did the report to the governor as sort of my segment of the economy performance cabinet. The governor was all over this. As soon as I said, Virginia's doing this, he had follow-up questions. And so what I'll be preparing is a memo to the governor specific to what we've learned from Virginia, answer some of his follow-up questions, and I want to get that to him within the next couple of weeks, probably when he comes back from the economic trip that he's going to be going on, so that we can really dig down more into that one that appears to be having some good success so far. The next item is, Sylvia, just share with us, if you would, from where you're at, some of these other ones that you recognize.
Right. So we did an AI guided search to just try to find out whether there were any other states doing something comprehensive like Virginia's doing and that we're Didn't find anything else. We found some like county or municipal level governments that are doing mostly like single agency or just like that. These are just links if you guys wanted to go into the PowerPoint and find out more about them. Some of them, I think mostly what we found were Department of Environmental Protections that are doing this type of permitting work online, you know, for transparency and intake. And yeah, I don't really have a whole lot more to share about that. I think the main point is that there aren't states that are really beyond Virginia that are doing what we're attempting to do.
Great, thank you. And we'll want to continue to identify any out there. The consultant that we talked to said that they are in discussions with the Louisiana right now, Washington State, and I think it was Oklahoma and West Virginia were the ones that I recall them naming. We know Pennsylvania is doing some work, but it's mostly on their environmental permit. So we'll continue to sort of gather that and what we learned, put in the resources subfolder in your folders. And wanted to just kind of continue to hear what else is happening. Anybody around the group that has had any, and Sylvia, please keep an eye out for a hand up from Jen out there if anything comes up from her. But has anyone had any other experiences that they might want to share where they've seen anything in terms of a coordinated effort? And maybe what we're finding is in fact true, that this is relatively new. If you do come across anything that you think would have direct relevance that we could learn from, let Sylvia know, because she's been kind of leading that research effort. So let's go to the next section, which is the section where I would like to get the council members to, I've said it's an action item technically. That's in the executive order that we should develop, but I would really want to make sure everybody's on board with what has been created. So we're going to dive into the selection criteria next and get your feedback, because this is pretty critical that we nail this down, because we've already started to gather prospective projects, which we'll talk about after the segment. But one of the things that'll come back to you at that June meeting is our portfolio. What are the projects that we want in our very carefully put into the manageable portfolio of projects that end up as the pilots, or what we tried to use as our test cases through this effort that we're undertaking. And so in doing that, if as a pilot, we want to ensure that we've got a really good diverse portfolio. And all of this criteria is actually in the EO, but we have developed it out with, you have this, and really the best way to see this is go online, because Sylvia's developed drop downs. So you can put in a project. Suzanne, I know you've done this, thank you, and several others have, where you can go to the drop down and say where it hits, and then the working group will take all of that and at their next meeting begin to vet and ensure that if we cross matrix, we don't want 20 projects that are all worth $1 billion, right? We want a whole cross section, so we have variety there. So I want to walk you through the criteria. We have a slide by slide. Before I do that, I want to point out that this first major bullet, EO section D, subsection 7B, is what's in the executive order. We have also flagged, Secretary Coker, you'll be pleased to see that in section F of the executive order, there are priority industries in emerging sectors. So while we're not required to include those, they are in section F. And I think it's quite important that if there are projects appropriate because of their stage, we should include some of those in our portfolio of pilot projects. So we wanted to point those out because of the governor's focus on these industries, that we needed to make sure we consider that, I think, anyways, our selection. So I want to walk you through each of those criteria, and at the end get any comments, any amendments, but in the end, with or without comments or amendments, adopt the criteria as it's being presented in this worksheet. So let's go to the next one, and we're just going to walk through these so everybody understands it. So we had to at MDP make the decision of what those drop downs were for each of these criteria. So in the worksheet, the Excel spreadsheet that's on Teams that the working group has already started to be engaged in, we have a drop down on cost with these different cost ranges to try to get a sense that we would have not only perhaps a couple of smaller projects, maybe that's too small, you tell us, all the way up to 5 billion. We just tried to pick these ranges, and I'm just going to pause at each one to see if anyone has any thoughts, comments, suggestions on these subsets on that cost category.
5 billion is. We can go more than that.
We could go higher.
Some projects.
Should we just say over 5 billion? Okay, so we'll add a category then.
1 billion.
Yeah, okay, a trillion. Yeah. Just say over a billion. You think that would be the better drop down, Joe?
Well, just you catch everything.
Yeah, why don't we change that one then to over 1 billion and capture those really mega projects? And that would probably put that there. So that's one change being recommended.
Do we think that there is anything under in the defense for the?
That's, I'll put it out there.
It's there could be gross.
Yeah.
Great. Not, I need to know because we want, because the thing I've learned, because I used to be a developer. So, from an economies of scale standpoint, it can be just as frustrating, just as difficult, but still have a lot of local impact, those little tiny projects. And it costs them more from an economy of scale standpoint to go through this than what a mega project does. And so, but it's a great question, the kind that I want answered. So I'm just going to make a note that we are going to put over 1 billion. I've got confirmation that under 100,000 is worth having in there. Any other comments on this one? Okay, next one. Complexity level. So the EO says complexity level. We simply broke that down into drop downs around low, medium, high, and extreme. The people who identify the project from the agencies are going to have to just use some judgment here. There is no clear indicator or metric that I'm aware of how we would define this, other than it's a pretty straightforward project, probably only one agency involved. It's something that maybe would get developed in a year. I'm just making this up. Versus that $1 billion project that might have 20 agencies involved, federal, state, local, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of moving parts. If you sort of think about that frame and figure it out, we just want to make sure we have a mix. Thoughts, ideas, comments, suggestions on this? Good enough? Okay.
I guess I have a question, and I don't want to nitpick words.
Please do.
The big distinction between high and extreme, innovation needed there at the end. And I know it also complicated versus complex at the beginning, but I would hope that we try to innovate all along.
Okay. It's a really good point, Secretary. Should be an overriding thing, right? Because anything should be innovative. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take innovation needed off? Because that way we're not making it specific to that. And then I do think the word, we need to maybe differentiate simple, complicated, complex, maybe do a little differentiation there, clean that up a little bit, which we could. Anybody has a brilliant idea, feed it to us. Okay, but 4 categories probably covers it. We'll make those changes. That's the kind of feedback I need, because this will determine that portfolio of pilot projects, how we figure it out.
I may add some of the complexity, at least for us, is when the federal government is involved. That adds a level of complexity.
Good metrics.
Local government involvement, so I think it may be coordination may just be internal. Think that in some ways that's a blessing. But when it goes outside of that domain,
that might be a way of helping to define those. That's a great idea.
Does it make sense to try to put some bounds around this? Because we might all have different ideas of what is extreme, but it could be like multi-jurisdictional or something that's just multiple agencies. Could be in like a medium or high. Potentially single agency, potentially would be low. But I agree when it's like federal, state, local, multiple agencies, that's going to be extra.
Yep. Appreciate that. Any other thoughts, feedback for us as we try to keep this usable?
Different number of permits to get through a process. I don't know enough about this space to know, are there things that are single permit or a small set of permits versus like there's a whole sequence of things that needs to happen in a certain order, and kind of going out of order is what winds up sending back. There is it's a tracker.
Yep. Yes. What I think I'll do is take this feedback and we'll also charge it to the working group to sort of help us frame that better, what we mean by each of these, and bring this feedback to them to help us finalize that aspect of this criteria. Yes, Secretary Booker.
I'd also be curious, perhaps as another department or agency that has something like this for their projects, that categorizes degree of difficulty, if you will. Transportation's got some significant projects. They might have something in their playbook that has categories defined along these lines.
Got it. Profile high controversy can be. Well, that's another factor, right? If there's a lot of public engagement, right? It's another factor. Thank you. Okay, great ideas. This is great. Anything else on this one? Okay, let's go to the next one then. Type. This one's interesting. This was the best we could do, and I'm sort of on a respect to this of sort of the different kinds of projects that are out there. There's no magic necessarily, other than if we were as a group to end up with a portfolio of pilot projects, what kinds of projects do we want in there to test out, right? So let me start with this ask. Is there anything on here that shouldn't be on there that's too granular or maybe just doesn't fit from your perspective? Okay, so I'm not seeing anyone wanting to eliminate anything. Is there anything is there something grossly missing from this list? Yes. Go ahead. Either one.
Maybe we would take hers.
Okay. Suzanne.
Or she may disagree with.
We're going to say the same thing.
I was going to say environmental restoration.
Okay, great.
/ resilient.
Right. Yes.
Okay. I'm lucky. Yeah, it just simply says type. So it's up to us to define what's in that list of the kinds we would want in our portfolio. So we'll add that. Environmental restoration. Okay.
/ resilience.
Well, do we want it together?
Often at this point, restoration and resilience are tightly bound.
They are. So we're good with keeping it matched. Okay. Super. Anything else missing? Okay. Is there anything that you think would be easier if we just combine them?
Well, that was the first thing that struck me, is that many of the projects that I think this body is designed to address will contain multiple of these categories at once. I can include one project upcoming that's going to have an SHA component, a water and sewer infrastructure component, and it's industrial.
Okay.
So I think in part of the assessment of what types of projects should come before this body, maybe how many of these categories are going to be included in the execution of that project could determine whether or not it's an appropriate match for this permanent council.
It's a really good point. And so, and actually, I think, Sylvia, on the drop-down menu, can they select more than one? Do you recall?
Don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's just one.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe we'll figure out how to address that. Because if these get vetted and we want to keep it manageable, it might be good to sort of have ones that
One thing
actually
it
address.
screams out to me like TOD, like that's something that's gonna touch like 90% of these types, just in one project. So
Great, good point. Other suggestions in terms of either combining a couple of categories or other issues you might run into as you were trying to navigate the worksheet? Okay, great. Next slide then. Geographic location. So the EO, like I said, all of these categories are in the EO. And so this is how we broke it down by region, because for obvious reasons, it would be great if we had a project, at least one from each region. And these are the regions we commonly use here at planning, but does this work for everybody? Does anyone view this or see it differently, or maybe should have some subsets in particular?
I think this is a good representation of regions. One thing I would say, because the creation of my office is also in this executive order, in order for me to demonstrate this kind of approach where I can have projects that represent all these regions, like it takes a lot of intentional outreach to these places. Because otherwise, without that, you might end in here and say, well, how come nobody applied for anything in Garrett County? Do they have nothing that befits this body? And that would be not a good question to have asked of this council. So I think some thought would have to go into how to recruit and identify projects in these regions so that we can demonstrate that equity at the end and not have to answer an uncomfortable question.
Absolutely. And I think that's where I'm really going to push the working group, because the working group should come to us at our June meeting with a recommended set of pilot projects. And part of their process will be to vet. And if that portfolio doesn't include anything from the Western region, then we should leave open in whatever that magic portfolio is to go back and look harder. And hopefully that will all happen over the next few weeks, that we will make sure we've got all that covered. But yeah, from my standpoint and the intent of the executive order, we need to have at least one project from every one of these regions. And I think I see a lot of heads nodding. Everyone agrees with that. So that's going to be part of our challenge, is to find those if one's missing when we start looking at the list.
So the region, yeah, we will.
So that might also be those smaller ones too, but at least where they're in there, right? Yeah. Okay.
It's also going to be important because there are going to be people, and it's happened to me already in my office at Business Advancement, where folks have reached out to me unilaterally to say, I hear there's a Maryland Permitting Council. How can I get my project on that council? Or they may reach out directly to the governor's office in Annapolis and ask the same question. And so that's something that this body will have to navigate as well, which is going to be tricky. Yeah, may be like appropriate for the Permitting Council, but the public is aware of this body and they're going to want access to it. And there's going to have to be a great degree of diplomacy to communicate what is befitting of this group. But I'm already getting those questions. So are you sharing that?
Yeah, that's good to know. And that gets back to the importance of the criteria, because if we set the criteria, what we will do is then put it on the website and we'll basically push it out so that it's not just us identifying project, and then that is part of that application process. And we sort of say, this closes by May 15th or something, and this is our pilot set, then it gives us the ability to say, this is it right now. As we test this out, because we can only test out so many projects at a time. That's not to say your projects aren't going to still all keep moving. There has to be a limit, and it can't be a rolling. We'll get overwhelmed and not get anything done. But I really like your point, Louise. That's why this and how we push it out will be so important. Okay, so these are going to be the 5 regions that we will use that are criteria to make sure we've got at least one project in every region. Next slide. Okay, design and development stage. This was something that I know I felt was really important because when I first started talking to Brad about this, I was like, Brad, some of these projects, no matter even in the best circumstances, could be a 4 or 5, or longer years to get through from pre-development through construction and opening. So let's make sure we have projects at different stages in their design development process and can learn from that. So these are the different stages that we're proposing. But I want to hear from you all because some of you are more directly involved with projects as to whether or not these are the right stages for that drop down once again. Does it look good? I mean, like I said, I used to do design and development, so I kind of went from my history of some of that.
We look at it a little different.
Yes, maybe, yeah.
Pre-application, but
Okay.
I think it's the same,
Okay.
it's comparable.
Okay, you think that'll read okay? Because for me, pre-development is kind of that schematic where the projects kind of coming together, the cost estimating and everything before you then get the go ahead to go into design.
Just to be clear, this is just for this outline is the real estate development process. For something for water and sewer may be completely different.
Well,
It's definitely a real estate.
it's a real estate focus, but I think it's like Suzanne, I think was alluding to, I think it could apply because you're still going to have to go through that pre-develop, that early stage of pre-development, process that I would say, to your point though, I mean, we could, instead of saying like schematic design, we could just say pre-development. It's all that stuff that happens before you pull the trigger on a really heavy investment or design, right? And I always think of it as schematic design, but we could simply just call it pre-development or pre-design. Would that be any clearer to anyone, you think?
I mean, I think if, like all these, we got to have some level of discretion because we might just have a slightly different approach. We might be doing two at once in certain phases, but at the end of the day, talented teams that can respond.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with it. I think it sounds like most of you all figured out what this was trying to say. We will just, kind of work with that. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is where we get into the ones that we feel should be in here and ensuring that Secretary Coker's team, on behalf of the governor, has some of these priority ones in the portfolio, so to speak. So I'm going to defer to Secretary Coker on this. How can we best reflect that or represent that for you?
Well, you have the 3 lighthouse sectors. Those bottom 3, computational biology, quantum technology, and PNT. Those are going to be lighthouse sectors that the state will be focusing on strategically. So you capture those precisely. The other ones, the priority industries, it's important to have them because although we're going to have a strategic focus on those lighthouse sectors, we're not going to neglect any of our incumbent industries.
Yeah, and we pretty much picked them up from the EO, and so I guess we can just present it as that, the way it's presented in the EO. But if you see a better way for us to present it as we go through this filtering process, we should know that now.
And upon further reflection, we have the priorities, and that's straight out of the winning the decade. Right. However, I don't see our agriculture, tourism services that are also enforced.
Do you think the agriculture tourism services would be captured under the project types? Because these are mostly place-based and infrastructure kinds of projects, so I'm not sure. I think agriculture, in terms of the value add projects that I know Mike's team's doing, gets captured under our project types.
Right? That's what I was struggling with when I first went into the working group when I was looking at this before, is that most of our agricultural businesses fit into some of those types. I mean, it's mostly, it would fit in the commercial because all agriculture is commercial, which then you go from commercial to then then you're into tourism, which is still commercial.
Yep, agreed.
So that's why I didn't speak up in any of that conversation to say agriculture, because ag already fits in commercial. And I think that it still fits in the life sciences in here. I mean, you could put another bullet underneath there, but it's straight. I mean, that priority is straight out of here. So
maybe we just stick with the EO language, and that gives our working group members, I think, some flexibility, but also some direction to sort of say, our portfolio that's recommended needs to include some of these types of projects.
Mike's explanation was spot on.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, then we're going to keep that in there, and going to be needing all of you to help us make sure we get some of these in the portfolio. So, Sylvia, I think that's our last slide here. Okay, so where we're at is that with these comments included and reported back to the working group to maybe do some fine tuning on that intake sheet. Go ahead, Joe.
Just so criteria make sense and inputs make sense, and we're going to try to streamline kind of permitting and move some of these priority projects forward as fast as possible. And what happens if we get an industry or a sector that doesn't fit in with the, like how we, this is one thing to ultimately categorize, which I think is what I was seeing there, but like, how do we prioritize, right? That might be a future meeting, but in terms of bandwidth, dollars, strategy, right? Like there's always going to be more want than capacity to actually fund on our side of the house. I mean, even with the revenue raising, which is great. We really appreciate the governor's leadership on that one this year. So I'm kind of thinking about it in terms of like, if those are our target industries, how are we this table, but other tables, actually mobilizing resource to enable, under your leadership. But again, it's, if we spread the butter equally, we'll never ever get or maximize the opportunity within those targets. So just, I don't know if we have an answer in terms of how this group would do work to, because there's a lot of things that can come onto this list. I've got a bunch of projects I could bring on, but I don't know if it's worthwhile for this group to be looking at all of the projects. If that makes sense.
Yes, and could I pick that up in the next segment?
Yep.
Because I think we could end up with 100 projects come in over the course of 6 weeks in some method, either through agencies or externally. We cannot, that is not a manageable portfolio. And so I think the first thing we'll do is vet those to ensure we've got this really cross representation. If there's 20 coming out of one region, then that alone begins to tell us, well, wait a minute, that's probably where some cuts need to start happening. So I do think that process using the criteria will help with that, just so we respond to the notion of a diverse set. But the second segment, I think, because we're going to talk a little bit about the projects that have come in so far, is sort of some of our ability to start getting our hands around what this is going to look like. And these are not selected. They're just some perspective ones that we're going to talk about next. Because what is a manageable portfolio, right? I mean, how many can we really manage in a year to really have good test case outcomes, but not get so overwhelmed that we don't get anything done? I think that's big question, is what's manageable.
Are the pilots to inform kind of archetypes? These are the types of projects that we have, and there's a whole kind of variety there. Or are we selecting priority projects that we want to kind of white glove and give special attention to and move through the process in a more expedited way? Or is it some mix of both?
Probably a mix.
The archetypes, like there might be small projects that no one is pounding the table that this gets white glove treatment, but we have a lot of them and they take a while and they could go faster. I think I'm just trying to calibrate on like what does success look like for the pilot project effort? Are we solving for transparency, which I think Virginia did? Like this is where things are. I don't know that they've actually tried to speed up where things are, but just to say you're on day 150 and it's going to take another 300 days or whatever that is. Is it more around wayfinding where like the intake wizard could say, based on the type of thing you're trying to do, these are all the things you need to do next? Or is it like accelerating all the steps? This takes 300 days, but we want it to take half that time. 'Cause I think that might also help us with some of the selection in terms of like what does success look like in a year?
Yeah, and to answer that, Marcy, I'm just gonna go directly back to the purpose statement. Because I think it's the former. I think it's to build a system. Build a system and a process and to create this interagency coordination that begins to make it all work better. But we're not going to solve all the world's problems in 1 year that we have available to us. But if at the end, in terms of success, we can feel really confident that we have been able to, through this selection of project types and through this piloting phase of 1 year, it's not enough, a lot of time. We at least know that we've started to create this approach to doing business better in Maryland. And then I would say after that year is when we can really start having something that can work to start moving scale at that point to achieve the bigger goal, which is, have that there so that projects can move faster. I can't say confidently that in the year we have in front of us, we're going to make a lot of projects move faster. However, we are going to ensure that we shed light on some of where those sticky parts are, how we could all be working better together, how we can have a better coordinated system. That will achieve without a doubt. But for me, when I go back to the purpose statement, facilitate coordination, efficient processing, advanced priority infrastructure, foster interagency coordination, you see again. So I think that's really the beginning point of this in the year that we have to work with, and then it'll grow from there. Your thoughts?
Finding the efficiency and what's wrong now will help the efficiency in us later.
Yes.
The sticking point for us, what we hear all the time is the Department of Health always is the problem with any type of ag and any type of ag tourism.
Wait, is the Department of Health?
They're not here. They're not here.
He concurs.
And that's what
They are not.
that's a discussion that we've had.
Somehow that got missed, but we are going to invite them to the table.
So that's always been the sticking point for us in any type of ag. It's just we've always had problems with the health department moving through their process. And then the rules changing within the process that they have internally.
Yeah.
So, that was what I was told to make sure that we put across as ag, because we're having problems and multiple problems with the health department and all of their things, their entire portfolio.
Sometimes it's our jurisdiction.
Yes, health was missed. We are going to invite them to the table. Even though they're not officially in the executive order, but now that we do have a newly appointed Secretary of Health, I will make sure and do that outreach and ensure that we get someone at the table from health, because we have heard that loud and clear. I want to circle back to that, but I also want to close out this. Are we good as our basis for the work, giving the working group the directive to, and for soliciting projects, to use this as with those comments that we received in our process?
Just one, and then we don't have to
Do you
take.
want to go back to
take
one of the
action
earlier
on it.
slogans? Or
Priority.
we go back to the overview one, maybe?
No, the priority, go to 24, please.
Or
And we kind of hit on this, and and I've been like noodling on it, right? So we have all of the pre-screen categories up here of transportation or mixed use or energy. And I kept on thinking there's enabling projects that enable this to happen, right? For IT, oftentimes if we're talking about data centers, it's an energy upgrade, EVs, what have you. But I don't know if that's the priority, but I'm thinking about the governor, some of the efforts that we've done, others have done. I know, Chair, what you're interested in some days of the week is housing. And what are the core inputs that are really important for these industries to thrive, and it's people, affordability, stuff like that. I don't know if we want to go ahead and put a special, because not transportation. There's a bunch of enabling, but I'm we have a housing issue that is limiting our ability to be competitive. Transportation, I think roads exist, right? We can better maintain them. We can hopefully get better transit in the future, yada, yada, yada. But I just wanted to put an asterisk if there's any kind of subsectors that are key enablers that we really want to highlight.
I'd actually, for that, Joe, go back to Sylvia, if you would go back to the project types category, slide. What I would propose, if there's any interest, is there any weighting? Like, do we want to give any directive to sort of say, okay, we want to make sure there's not just one residential project, for instance, or we want to make sure that, because I think this is going to be our moment today to provide any direction and guidance to the working group that'll come back to us. And so I think, picking up what you're saying, Joe, I think it's more as it relates to this group in terms of, we know that if there's not housing to support a workforce, that has a multiplier effect, right? We know if there's not infrastructure and sewer systems to support the building of that residential, that's a multiplier effect. So to me, it's more relevant to this list that are those enabler projects that help us get somewhere, perhaps. And so, to your point, is there any added direction we want to give to the working group as it relates to this list and the others we added?
Getting housing approved is a challenge, right? Transportation, we can figure that out. That's kind of bread and butter. But housing is a complex, sticky wicket in a lot of areas of the state. And so that's just why I would say maybe we put an extra special layer on that, whether it be here or elsewhere.
The problem is where housing gets hung up is not under our control.
Right.
I mean, I can call you two and you can get it done. It's less accessible at the local level.
But then they point fingers at us and say it's our.
And I think that brings up the efficiency portion of this entire conversation. Is that as long as we know what we're doing in our house, when it gets out of our house is where this sticking point continues to stop. So I think that point's pretty interesting because that's what we also run into as well. So I think they're all great points. It's just I don't know if an other at the bottom of that would do that, or a type A that it's multi. Is it a singular problem or is it multiple problems?
Anyway, we keep moving. I just wanted to put it.
Okay, no, and this is a good discussion.
Housing has to exist for all the other.
And, I think to the point being made, let's see what comes in. What comes in through our agency solicitation and our posting and broader solicitation is grossly missing something, then we'll circle back. Or if we have too many of one type, I think we just trust the process a little, see what comes forward to us in June. Know that you all have people on that working group that I think will help us sort through some of that at that level. These are really good things this meeting's being recorded. And so all of this is going to, I think, be part of the charge to the working group. Okay, let's go back to my action. So I am going to ask for a motion to accept this project selection criteria with the comments that were made today as what we're going to use to move forward to start soliciting projects. Anyone?
I'd like to make a comment before that motion.
Okay, go ahead. No one's made the motion yet.
And it's in response to something that you said a moment ago, and I'm paraphrased, but I think your interpretation of the text is accurate, the executive order, but you also said, realistically, we're probably not going to make some of these projects move faster next year. I think most of us at this table have had enough experience in permitting at the local and state level to know that that's true. But something to flag is that the business community, chambers of commerce, key stakeholders, and others who are looking at the title of this executive order but not reading the text that you just cited accurately, they are computing the Maryland Permitting Council equaling things going faster. That is what they are hearing. That's what their elected officials are telling them. they are cheerleading this body because that's what they think this is going to do. And so if whatever pilot projects are chosen, if a year passes and at the end of the day, when the powers that be ask those principals of these projects, hey, did things actually go faster? Did it move more efficiently, a la VPT or the other examples? And the answers are no. That's going to be problematic.
Absolutely.
So I don't think that, I think this language is one thing, but the expectations in the public are a very concrete, different thing. And that is the universal feedback that I am receiving. It's people are excited about this permitting council because they think it's going to make their permits be issued in a more efficient and quick fashion. And that might be conflicting reality, but perception is reality.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to face that. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, because that's what I'm hearing. People are like, this is great that this exists.
I know, believe me, I hear it every time.
Or whatever it might be. And that's going to be a messaging challenge. I just want to put it on the record because I do think this council has to make things go faster. Like that's the governor's charge.
I think two things. One, we do have to message and manage expectations first and foremost, because there is a reality, and I don't want to overpromise and underbill. So that's first. And then secondly, having that's part of the criteria that's around what stage is the project at, I think gives us an opportunity to ensure we have some projects that we can show as wins at the end. And I think that really is going to behoove us to make sure that we have some of those that we can truly get behind, have wins, because we have all worked together to make that happen. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't want to, in my reality, miss that we absolutely should have some wins as sort of like, here's how this is going to work, and we're going to try to scale it after our first year.
And targets for wins.
Yes, absolutely.
Where can we deliver that we can say a year from now, actually, we moved this one a little quicker because of this body?
Absolutely. Let's have some testimonials to that.
That's
and I think having those project owners with us will hopefully result in some of those testimonials ultimately, and learn, what did we learn? What are we doing better now? Even if we just say, well, this has improved, I think that'll be part of it. But thank you. Okay, so with that, can I take a motion? Anybody want to make a motion? Just so I have something for the so moved. Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Mike, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstain? Jen, are you out there? Can you throw a thumbs up for us?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Just so I can show unanimous support. Okay, folks, that was a great conversation. I really appreciate it, because this is fundamental to where we're going to be going. So the next segment is about the projects. And this is sort of what I think of as a sneak preview into what needs to happen over the next few weeks. So Sylvia, go ahead if you would. Okay. So far we've had 13 pilot projects proposed through the working groups primarily. They have made entry, and they're not all on this sheet, I see. But they have directly, this worksheet is online, they have directly entered projects. And I know agriculture has another one they want to share today. And so that's the process that has already begun using the criteria as we have it now. I think the big thing is, this is sort of a summary. 6 were defined so far as what we consider high impact. We've got 4 out of the 8 cost ranges, 8 out of the 11 types. So that's pretty good. 4 out of the 5 geographic areas, and 4 out of the 6 design development stages. So not bad. And that's just sort of with an initial solicitation of what we had to work with. We wanted to give you the spreadsheet so you would have at least that sort of big at a glance. This doesn't have the drop downs, obviously, but you get a sense of some of the projects that are being put forth. Sylvia, next slide. I think it is. Okay, yeah, I'll go to that next. So two things in terms of what's in there. We are populating this now after today, when we can finalize the criteria, we will do another round of solicitation from the agencies. We will also post some type of user-friendly component to that website we've set up. And I'll probably look at my calendar dates, but we will need to have these all kind of in the system before the May meeting of the working group, because the May meeting of the working group is going to have to be where they really get down, really, that all of this. So the working group has a May 19th meeting. So I'm going to have to do a cutoff at least a week or more before that. So let's say I'm going to try to do like a 4-week solicitation, and ensure that the working group at their May meeting, pretty much that'll be their focus: vetting, screening, proposing a set of projects to come to us at our June 16th meeting. And so what they will be doing is, yes, using this criteria, we'll see what comes in, we'll see where we have gaps. If we have gaps, we'll do another very targeted recruitment. And then we'll see what comes in from outside. I want to give you a sense of what will happen after that. So once we agree in June, ideally, because we don't have a lot of time here, on the pilot set of projects, there will need to be project teams. And so that's why I really want it to be manageable. Let's just pick a number. Let's say it's 20 projects. That means there's potentially 20 project teams being stood up that are all coordinating. This is why we're going to keep that list manageable, because none of us have the bandwidth in our staff. And this cannot be, we don't want to fail. So we have to, I'd rather have a few that are a huge success than have too many that we can't get done. But what we'll be asking for is there will be a project lead. Whoever agency is probably most involved will have to be a project lead. We will use Microsoft Projects to put together a work plan so that we can begin to understand that flow of all the other permits, all the other things that are going on. I mean, when I used to do project management for development projects, I mean, most development projects have this. We have to build it to run a project. We have our Gantt charts and our project, different software packages that we use to manage the project. So in some cases, and I'll share with you the one that we're going to share next, that may already exist, because if you're working with the developer, they haven't, because they track it. They track all of us and everything that needs to get their project from A to B and Z. It'll be a matter of how once we select this portfolio, how we begin to engage and get involved in that. The executive order specifically does include the ability to pull in federal and local as needed, so that we can understand and learn about where that fits into these processes. So while it is geared towards how the state, how we kind of focus on our part of the puzzle, it's not ignoring the other parts of the puzzle. We want to shed light on those other parts of the puzzle. So that's what'll happen. So that core working group, and I'll do an org chart eventually, but that working group will be those folks that can really help bring forward to us. We'll select, then those project teams will have to get formed. Okay. Next slide, Sylvia. So I wanted to share this one. It's just, we had all 13 in here, and I didn't want to try to get into all of those today. But this one was really interesting, because when we did our cabinet meeting in, would that have been March, Secretary, I think? This was one of our sites that we visited. And, with my background, my first thing was I zeroed in on the master plan. I wanted to know what was going on. The governor was there, several of the cabinet members, to learn more about this project, which had so many aspects to it and an amazing project team. And I was like the last one to leave. I sat there chatting with these folks. One of the questions I asked is, I said, because I think they got through approvals. Do you remember, Secretary, like 10 months?
Yes.
I was like, okay, tell me your keys to success. And they said, It was a coordinated approach. I couldn't have teed it up better. And so the conversation afterwards was just like, tell me more. Would you want to be part of this, this pilot that we're doing? So I've already kind of invited them because there's so many components to what they're doing, including a data center, including how their site is located, a lot of cool pieces. And we have, in that case, the project owners that say, yes, we would love to work with you and we'd love to get our next phase going through this. In an ideal world, these projects that we're going to be naming, at least some of them, will have those kind of project owners that will actually come in here and talk to us. We'll invite them in. We'll have them talk about what's going on with their project. How's it going? What are you learning? What are you finding? Because if we don't talk to the customer, so to speak, we've only got half of the, information, right? So I wanted to just feature that one to let you know that, first of all, I was kind of blown away about 10 months. Now, some of the zoning was in place, a few things were in place, but it truly was, I think it's a great case study. And I'll probably want to bring them in, not the June meeting, but maybe soon after that, and bring more in as part of our meetings to learn from. But any comments about how we engage or interact with some of these types of projects and how we can ensure that we truly begin to understand the full system out there, how it's working?
I guess just the mechanics of it. So these work groups would be expected to meet or check in frequently, or pinging the other agencies to see where that process is. And we're just tracking.
Two things. So there's two things. So the working groups are the ones that are going to be really roll up the sleeves, focused on that set of pilot projects. The sooner we define those, the sooner we know which are the right people around that table. And then we'll have those subsets of project teams as needed. It might be that all the right people are around the table in that working group, our subset. That is not an open meeting group. That is the group that can get their work done, can say what they need to say, about the different parts of the system. A project like this is sort of, if that were to become one of our pilots, we might bring in that project owner for us to talk to and just learn about their project as a cross-agency kind of opportunity. And as just one of our meeting agenda items, basically.
Okay, that's helpful. I think just in a little deeper, the subgroup that's managing the projects. Let's take this example.
Yeah.
What are they doing between each month to evaluate the process? It's too fast, or it's too slow, or
they are the ones that are really beginning to sort of setting some of the requirements for how the technology is going to work. Because if that team, let's say there's 3 agencies, let's say MDE, health, and DNR are involved in a particular project we pick, then whoever's point on each of those teams comes together and says, hey, did you know this is happening over here and this is happening over here? And they start to understand what that process flow is. And they begin to inform what's working, what's not, where it's getting hung up, because they're handling that project. The other approach, it's going to be different in almost every case. In some cases, this is that level of complexity. It may be just one agency and they could just be part of the working group and how we set up those agendas. I think my biggest, I'm gonna answer your question, but the other bigger concern is this parallel path that's going to be happening with the technology build out. So once we have the projects and we sort of understand what the systems approach is, and Marcy's all over systems, as am I, then we can start understanding the process flow and how the internal system will need to work, which will have to get built first, so that the DNR, the MDE, and the help and the MDA can all on the inside see how this project is tracking and where they fit in and where it was stuck here. But DNR never would have known that if that team wasn't coming together as a unit. It's a little vague, but I think in some respects, we got to get in there, start building and learn from some of what we find out. Because I think a lot of times we're flying blind because everybody sort of sees their piece, but it's only that project owner that maybe sees the whole picture. And that's what we have to start being able to see is that whole picture.
Would be super helpful for me, speaking of flying blind, is understanding what technology is currently being used and where. And are people happy with what they have? Like, is there a thing that works well for an agency that could be expanded to be a kind of tracker all the way through? Or is everything kind of not what we need?
Yeah, that's going to be part of our assessment in the next. So let me go to that.
Okay.
Okay. Let me finish out this because I just wanted to throw out that one example. What we will have for you in June is more of a detailed slide on every single project we're putting in front of you as part of the portfolio. And that's going to be a lot of work between now and June, which is why I'm glad we have until June. So that you can all feel confident we've got the right portfolio. We won't stand up the project teams, independent project teams, until we get that portfolio approved. And I think I'll be able to answer your question better than Julie. Yes, Louise.
Incidentally, the project that I alluded to earlier that involves multiple agencies is this one.
Okay.
And there are elements of that project that are estimated to take 5 years that they'd like to take 2 years.
Yeah.
And their understanding is that this body might be able to help you do that. So
if we can, I would love to.
This came up because they're happy now and they're very forward thinking and positive business persons to work with. But that's also that is the
expectation.
That is the expectation that will have to meet reality. So it's just it is the example of like.
It's a great example because this body should be about problem solving. This body should be about daylighting where it's sticky, daylighting where there could be expedite, and figuring out are there ways that we can make that happen. Yeah. Right. And so having a project owner that's like ready to go and work with us and understands that they're helping us build this engine is great because that's what we want. And hopefully the tricky thing will have to be is because some of these are development deals, this is an open meeting. And so some of that might need to occur at the working group level versus I understand there will be certain things they can't divulge. And I get that. So, Joe, before we move on.
So I guess essentially what we're trying to set up are 13 state-led teams to help expedite the delivery of some deal, private, public, nonprofit, likely going to have a self-interested individual on the other side, and a lot of permitting at the local or federal. And essentially what you're trying to do is just set up the state's team to do 13 deals. Now,
I would just correct, we don't know how many yet.
Okay.
13 just is what's in there right now, but we will have to decide how many we can manage. We may say we only can do 10.
Gotcha. So this is largely an economic development strategy. So going back to my kind of prioritized criteria here of like just making sure we aren't spreading the butter and we're being focused on what our priorities are in terms of economic. Because again, there's a lot of work that we all do day in, day out. And if we're going to go ahead and exert a bunch of additional energy to try to deliver for the state, just make sure we're delivering on the priorities of our state's vision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way it's, worded in the executive order, we particularly said, in terms of the types of projects, language there, place-based and what is that in there? I always miss that section, but it's a couple types in particular. And we wanted to be place-based, but also infrastructure, I think is the other word I'm looking for that's in here. So we are kind of narrowing it a little bit from that standpoint. I'll find it later. I don't want to hold us up right now. But I think the big thing is that's why I've been unwilling to pick a number. We could say let's do 5 really well, and if those are diverse, and if those 6 because we have 5 regions, and if those 5 are a good representation of project types, so we can test this platform that we're going to be building, and we can have willing owners to work with us, and we daylight other parts of the approval process, some of which we have no control over. That gets to the transparency of saying, well, state's on it. We're doing it. Work with others, and when we get the other 4 representatives here, which I think it's not about pointing fingers so much as just sort of let's really understand what's really going on in terms of some of this. Yeah. It's also, I think, in terms of what we pick, why the Key Bridge is probably not going to be on the list. It's too massive. It's too big.
It's also doing great.
It's doing great. I don't think there's any reason for that to be one that we tackle necessarily. I think
Said you wanted to win.
I wanted to win.
Collaborative effort.
But I'm here to facilitate. So in the end, it'll be what we come up with. Okay, let's move to the next segment because I think I want to get back to where Marcy. Oh, well, we've got this, and then we'll get to some of the platform stuff. But I wanted to give a chance for a couple of the agencies to do a little bit of what Marcy alluded to, is that, yeah, there's stuff there now. Some of it works well. Some of them is in the process of rebuilding. We need some connective tissue. And we're gonna have to figure out what that looks like with DoIT's help and others. But I think next slide, Sylvia. Yeah, we're just a summary of some of the overview of what's out there based on our inventory so far of the different types of systems being used by different agencies. The review processes. This is just sort of some highlights that came out of our first working group meeting. I, without even being a permitting agency, well, I sort of am under Section 106 under MHT, but it's all over the place in some respects, and everybody does their own piece, but how does that all connect? So next slide, Sylvia. I think it's MDE. So Suzanne, just tell us a little bit about what you are seeing with your system right now and what you're in the process of doing.
So I think day one, Secretary McElwain's entry is going to focus on efficiency. So 2 really key things have been put in place that are going to allow us to be successful really within your time frame within the next 6 months. So one is thanks to DoIT, a major project allowing us to take our enterprise system and have an online permit portal. So that alone, based on conversations with our friends in Virginia, they saw a significant increase in or significant decrease in turnaround time, increase in efficiency, decrease in the time it takes to permit. So we will have phase 1 of that done by November of this year. The second thing that we don't have is payment processing. That will also be done by November of this year. Again, working closely with DoIT. And for those of you that have been in the state, that sometimes it should be easier than it is, but because of our financial processing tools, it's a heavy lift. We will have that by November. So those 2 issues alone, we do expect to get a significant improvement in our turnaround time. The next big item that the Secretary has really worked on since day one is standardization and making sure that our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, are standardized across the agency, and a real focus on reducing inefficiencies in that process. So asking our programs to really have a flow chart of their processes, look for areas that are linear, perhaps, that can be concurrent, and look for repetitive things that are not necessary. So internal efficiencies in terms of reducing steps in our standard operating procedure. Again, we expect that to be completed by end of year this year. All those SOPs have been inventoried and over the last couple of years, so that's well along. The third thing, which will take a little bit longer, but we do have a goal for this summer, is looking at the regulatory requirements and the statutory requirements for what must be reviewed. Sometimes our well-meaning colleagues 30 years ago in our legislature have required us to review or analyze certain facets of a permit application that either are no longer relevant or there's a better way of doing it. So what are the statutory or regulatory requirements for our permit processing that we may want to bundle together and either change the regulations, which is under our control, put together a streamlining bill for next year. That will take a little bit longer, but I think it's a really important step that we embark on over the next 12 to 24 months. Finally, resource allocation. What is the demand for each one of our permits or environmental services? And we're actually extending this into our business administration as well, because I can only process permits as well as my staff can be supported with all of their other business services. But how many, what's the demand for this permit? How many people do we have? Let's break it down by steps. So with our SOP and the flow chart associated with our SOP, we're looking at, Julia, if you're taking 15 days on that process, well, how many requests do you have per month? And why does it take you that long? And maybe Julia needs 2 other folks to support her on that. Or actually, maybe we can just ask you to do it faster. So, you know, all of the above, but the resource allocation is a really important process, and helping train our staff not to just say, I feel like we need another person, but to really justify that based on business requirements. What is the demand? What is the efficiency? How can we go to the legislature and say, we would like to reduce this turnaround time? The way that we can do that based on our analysis is we maximize the technology efficiency, but we will need to add humans. At the same time, we're piloting. We have our enterprise system that we're using. We're married to it in the short and medium term, but we are working with new systems that have safe and effective AI to analyze internally what are all the permits that we've already approved. How would this one compare to it? So there's a first order review where AI, again, only internal facing, no external, no cybersecurity, can be used to help our permit writers be more efficient. Another place where we're going to be doing a pilot study, we've had 2 very controversial permits in the last 6 months with thousands of public comments. We have already done our review process as a beautiful data set to now go and use generative AI that we're allowed to use generative AI to go backwards and say, how would generative AI review these public comments and what are the answers that they would provide? How do we use that today to improve efficiencies for a very slow part of our process, which is the public review process? So those are some of the key areas that we're working on at MDE.
Great. Thanks for that summary. Let me move over next to MDOT. State Highway is essentially part of this team, and Joe's representing all of that. So, Joe?
Yeah, and I'm joined here with Kenya Lucas, our operations engineering manager, and the chief operations officer's assistant at the State Highway Administration. So I think one of the main concerns that we hear regularly, complaints, are that, our permit review process for projects that we do not initiate, as in, developer or local led projects that touch our facilities right away, have too many reviews, or it takes too long, or SHA reviewers are too stringent, or SHA reviewers are changing between reviews. And that we hear that concern and are aware that this is a challenge. I think we would, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing about it. We have our own internal complaints, and Kenya works on the team and can back up some of them. But we've also got concerns in terms of the quality of the submittals. Oftentimes, they get submitted, we ask for feedback, and then they say you need to approve it tomorrow, and that's harder said than done. On top of that, we are not really part of the actual process oftentimes that the counties will do. And so they'll come to us last. And then when they come to us last, they're asking for things that don't actually meet our access manuals or guidance. And then folks blame everything on us. So what we're doing internally and what we're going to do externally, which I think is a root cause issue that I talked to the chair about, and we will take this fight within this group or elsewhere. But so what we're doing, we've got a dashboard developed to check for efficiency and accountability, regularly updating and tracking. We're offering more pre-scoping opportunities with counties and municipalities for projects. We're doing internal quarterly meetings with permitting review divisions. We've got flowcharts developed for public-facing partners to explain our process, whether or not they like the process. We explain the process. And then we're ultimately trying to have more intentional engagement with developers early on. Of course, they don't necessarily come to us always early, which creates problems. But we view ultimately some of the challenges that we have are root cause issues in terms of not necessarily being brought in early in the process, principally at the county level. And so they'll get all the way through the county planning and permitting process and then say, oh, your SHA approved this. And so we're working to try to update our access manual and our traffic impact study guidance, pretty technical documents, but really important to better planning to make sure that we're not chasing development, right? Because oftentimes what will happen is a sighting might happen in the middle of a field somewhere, and then all of a sudden we're down the road 2 miles, and next thing you know, trucks are showing up, and there's a $250 million interchange that folks are asking for. That happens regularly. Do we have $250 million? Probably not, but they might want it in 2 years, which we certainly will not have. So I think how we partner and work in a proactive manner and establish a better process is really important, not just for our ability to deliver for the state, but also for our partners to understand. Because I think sometimes we might not be able to do it faster, but we can certainly do it better and more transparent if everybody kind of understands the standard operating procedures. So that's our aim. And it's not easy to update those because those are technical in nature and also political sometimes. And so we will be doing that dance over the next 8 months to 24, hopefully.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I just wanted to feature a couple. I'm going to go ahead and do it next. Did I tell you about this? So he looks surprised.
What can you talk about?
No, we just had up your systems approach, just a couple words about sort of how you're thinking about your role in kind of the systems approach to because you're really touching all of these in a lot of ways, right?
So I will start by saying I am not thinking about this from the lens of what technology should we apply. And what I want us to do ideally is think about, I know that there's lots of efforts around kind of flowcharts and processes. I don't want us to just translate forms into digital versions of forms because we lose all of the benefit of improving the experience, removing these choke points, easing the burden for people. So really thinking about what is the information that we need to collect. And that's why I was asking the question earlier about the pilots kind of being these archetypes. The list that you had of different types of projects. Do construction projects do residential construction projects follow the same path every time? We always get this information first and then second and third and fourth. I'm seeing faces that make me think that I'm oversimplifying things, but are there repeatable things so that we can start to move away from on the back end, sure, we need the paper, but on the front end, we need data. So how do we ask a question that we don't already know the answer to? And we are just kind of adding to the story over time. So in the beginning, we need to know these 10 things that helps us navigate people to the right path so that they can understand what are the steps, what's the right order, how long do these things take, what should it cost, how do I escalate if I haven't heard back by the time frame you told me I was going to hear back. That work of service design and really understanding for the 5 pilots or however many, I'm going to go with 5 because it's a less scary number than 13. For the 5 pilots that we're going to tackle, what really is the process? What do we have right now at different parts of the process? So if something takes 300 days to get through all the approvals, and I'm just throwing out big numbers, are there certain choke points that can be improved through better design, better communication, more transparency, changes in policy, process? Like there's lots of different levers that we can take. I don't want to come in and go, it's Salesforce, that's going to solve all our problems, because that is not going to solve all of our problems. It may be a piece, like it is certainly technology is going to be a component of how we think about this, but I want to really understand what are we solving? When I did similar work at Department of Veterans Affairs, looking at the disability claims process, like we had a target, it took 218 days and somebody had promised Congress that it would take 150 days, but they had no idea what took 218 days. And it became clear through this mapping process, talking with veterans, talking with claims adjudicators, talking with medical examiners, what took 60 days, like one step took 60 days. And it was just this do loop of you submitted the wrong thing because you didn't understand the question. Now we have to send you a letter. And what are those types of wins where we actually can really compress things instead of like rounding the corners of going from 218 days to 210 days? Nobody's going to feel better about that. And if we can't actually make it faster, which we couldn't for the appeals process, we could at least say, it's going to take 3 years before we look at your appeal. There are 350 veterans in front of you. And the people that we told that to, it's a terrible answer. But they said, at least I know you didn't lose my thing. At least I know what to expect. I'm not going to call you every day. So there's a lot of levers that I think we can pull, but we need to really understand what's happening, not just there's a difference between the flow chart, what should happen, step 1, step 2, step 3, and what is actually happening, which is between step 1 and step 2, I had to make 60 phone calls and drive into an office and find all this paperwork that had already submitted. Like what is actually happening? And I think that's where my team can be helpful in terms of mapping out that reality.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Not technology.
Yes, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, so that's just a couple snapshots. Probably asked a few more of you to give some snapshots at the next meeting. And then I think I want to try to incorporate into the template for how we approach our quarterly reports to the governor, incorporate and acknowledge the great work that is happening. And we need to knit together, add efficiency and coordinate, so I need to think about what that format of that report's going to look like and how we knit some of that together. Louis.
I've heard a thought there just as a piggyback on your comments. If we all had nickels for all the time someone complained to us about permits being slow, but it's actually on the applicant and on some this would have to be weird. That seems obvious, but almost nobody captures data on how often the delay is incumbent on the applicant for not following directions, for not uploading the proper plans, So in terms of reporting, that might be something worth looking into. So that when folks say, oh, well, things are taking too long, well, how often does it come to pass with these pilots that actually the delay isn't on the part of state government or local government? Actually, the delay is on the business person. Just capturing that note, I think is a really defensible and valid piece of data. And I've never seen in my career anywhere where you could say, well, actually 17% of the time it's user error. So that when they go to Mr. Deputy Mayor or elected official and say, well, they're being slow.
I had one of those come into me today.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with you. I think that there is a lot of benefit of transparency because people might not even realize that it's on them to take the next step. But the comment about user error, how do we set people up to be successful? Because they are struggling because it's hard. It's like, not to pick on another agency, but procurement is hard in the state. It's hard on agencies. And when we have these conversations with Office of State Procurement, they're like, well, agencies take a while to do their part, but we get a 150-page template that we have to fill out. So how do we remove burden? If it's on the applicant and they are stuck, are they stuck because they're slow, or are they stuck because they don't understand something? And how do we help them kind of navigate that?
We could probably talk about that forever.
Yeah, I'm gonna move this along.
Okay.
Looking at my time. Suzanne, you want to make a comment?
I just want to your point, I know I was talking to my colleague at Virginia who their clock moves in a different way than ours does, so I don't want to set myself up. When my colleague in Virginia daylighted their process with an online Gantt chart showing where in the permit, they saw a 60% reduction in time. So there's your data point for when is it that when you add transparency.
And that's the same data point I heard yesterday, where it's amazing what a motivator transparency can be, and just daylighting where the situation is.
And I didn't intend to not answer your question, but I remember by saying, we can talk about it all day.
I'm happy to talk about it as well. Yeah.
We'd be glad to talk about it.
I am going to move us along. I love this discussion that's occurring. Intake system and dashboard, rolling right into that. Mike Haxel, do you want to just give us your sense of sort of your part of this world? Do you want to go up there, or do you want to just stay on? Would you just see it?
Yeah. So right now we're, I guess, in the exploratory phase of review of the current permitting systems throughout the state. We're trying to get a good sense of how each department handles their permits, stores them, and how the public accesses them. So working with DOIT to try to determine the best course of action. And to Marcy's point, to not recreate the wheel. So try to think of something that's not a catch-all solution, but that'll kind of integrate with what each department's currently doing.
Yep. Thanks, Mike. And so we're in that inventory assessment stage of what do we have now, and how much of that can we build on. Ultimately, as I referenced earlier, one of our tasks is to build a particular both internal facing and an external facing system. And right now, the best we can do is begin to sort of assess and understand what do we have, identify these projects, understand what those requirements are going to be. And we are hopeful that that system at some level would be available by fall to get us testing and using. And that's gonna take some effort. But that's our goal. So
is the intent behind that system more of the tracking as things move, or is it the end to end? This is where all of you will go to do your actual work, like the review of what comes in. Because there's a real difference.
There's a huge difference, and I don't think I can
any applications in your own system. And this is just supposed to be that connective tissue to say it's gone from agency A to agency B. Now agency B work in your system to do whatever process you have.
So I'm going to go back to my guidebook. Develop an online internal intake system, and a public facing dashboard for tracking project plan reviews and permitting. So right now, because we are taking on a pretty big task, we're gonna stick with the program. That doesn't mean that we aren't thinking about and looking for ways that we can build on that and scale over time. But I think right now the answer is more about interagency, internal inputs, externally a tracking and transparency approach. I think of when you go to the doctor's office, how many forms do you fill out and how many times do you say the same thing over and over and over again, right? I mean, let's not overly complicate it right now, because we could get so bogged down and spend 5 years just figuring out the perfect solution versus trying to get some of the core components moving forward and then build on that over time. And I'm not an expert in that. That's why we will bring together probably a special focus group around that piece and get all the requirements defined. right now, get the inventory, get the assessment, get the pilot projects, and then start defining some of the requirements and some of the system needs, and then go from there. So let me go to the last segment of our day. Milestones, timeframes. Go ahead, Sylvia. Okay. Basically, the one that I'm looking at right now is the report to the governor on June 30th. And so, interestingly, the executive order does not require this body to be up and running until July 1st. There was no way if we waited until July 1st for our first meeting, we were ever going to hit the July 30th, 2026 deadline of having this underway. So therefore, I have challenged my team with the notion that, yes, we will have a report to the governor, even though it wasn't explicitly asked as to when the first report is, but we will have it to the governor by June 30th with progress to date, which will be basically during this second quarter of this calendar year. I think that setting the template for what that looks like, how we provide these reports to the governor, and I think we need to not hesitate by identifying not only progress, but issues, challenges. I mean, what are the things we need to put out there? But that's what I'm focusing on right now as we try to put all these other things up and going. So next slide, Sylvia. I think it is. Next steps. Go ahead. Okay. So next steps for us right now, and then we'll do a closing round with everyone, but is the working group. So if your agencies, I believe every agency has identified someone, but now that you've had a chance to come together and learn more about this, make sure you've got the right person on the working group. Okay. Because that working group is going to be crucial to where things really happen at a big, at a working level, roll up the sleeves level, right? That group may evolve as the projects are identified, because you may say, well, I've got this person on it, but since this project was selected, can we add this person too? Absolutely. And so that I've told people, as they said, well, I'm not really sure who to put on it. I said, I tell you what, give me your best person that's going to understand permitting and how that happens in your agency, or is on the other side of it of trying to move, businesses or systems through. And if you need to add another person later when we have our pilot set, then we can do that. Their first charge is going to be taking this criteria, tweaking it, and then start identifying that project list for us and a variety of other agenda items. I am also anticipating, and use whatever terminology you want to use, but we need a group that really knows how to design this system that is in here. And that's the intake and the dashboard system. And those are the people that will need to come together as their own task group to really begin to dig in on that. We are also going to need another task group that helps, I think, with the informal inventory we've been doing right now and assessment. It could be the one and the same with the working group, but we really want to know what you're doing and what you're working on. There's probably going to be a template for that also. But I don't feel like that's the same type of work that we want to see happening in the working group, sort of more of a special team. Because I don't want to ask Suzanne a bunch of stupid questions. I want to ask the right questions. So it's like, help me define what that template should look like. How do we begin to understand what do we have now? And there'll be a group around that with some of you. So that'll lead us towards our next permitting council meeting. So it's 2 months away. But we have a lot of work to do in those 2 months, so that by June 16th, what I would like for us to be able to have in front of us is the recommended project list. Ideally, if you're communicating with your working group member, you won't be surprised when you see that list. It'll be, okay, make sure we've got the right, but we will discuss and approve that pilot set. We can't go much past June 16th. It will never be able to get to some outcomes. We will get the council seats filled. If you have not already recommended somebody or given me a name that fits those 4 areas, please do, because we need to know. We have the new appointment secretary sworn in. We need to really move that through that system, because these are governor appointees.
And keep in mind, those 4 appointees that are local appointees need to be folks that can really work with us constructively. Maybe they've already done something like this at the county or municipal level. They're folks that will really have constructive engagement around that part of this system that has to improve. So if you have thoughts, ideas, I have a few now, but feed them to me because I'm going to go ahead and start pushing people through that system. We'll update on what are we learning from the agencies. We'll do an update on what I'm loosely calling this tech design side. We'll call it someone else. If those folks tell me call it something else. I want to also, at the June meeting, really begin to have an honest conversation about where we have gaps and needs. We may not get exactly there by the June meeting, but I think it's going to start becoming evident that maybe there are certain things for us to do our charge as a permitting council. There may be gaps and needs. I know personally, every time people are running from me at this point when I go into Annapolis, because I keep saying, you promised me 2 pins. I don't have the staff to do what we've been asked to do, so I am going to keep pushing that. And I'm going to need, we're just going to have to figure this out. So right now we're kind of bootstrapping this. People we have, but not necessarily experts in some of this, and we'll get it done. The other thing will be our first quarterly report to the governor. So I hope to at least have some of the draft of that to you so you can take a look at it, make sure you're good, and then we'll get that submitted 2 weeks later. So that's what's coming. Let's do a quick closing round. Next slide. Let's just kind of go around the table. Let's start with Jen. Jen, any closing comments out there?
I'm still just taking it all in.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Okay, then let's just start, keep going from the bottom up. Marcy, closing comments.
I have lots of thoughts.
Okay.
I think that there is a lot to talk about and unpack with regard to the technology piece and truly thinking about what is the doable thing that we can get done between now and the end of the year. And there are a lot of layers to this process. So I don't want us to bite off so much that, to your point, we kind of touch everything a little bit, but we don't get anything actually done. That said, I want to make sure whatever we do by the end of the year actually helps move some piece of this equation forward, even if it's just transparency. That's still significant.
Totally agreed. And I think this is going to be really important for us to articulate, because I know in an ideal world, there is something that would love to see us run 50 projects through, and it's not going to work. Not if we want to succeed. And so we're going to have to, that word manageable, I'm going to lean on a lot. Let's go over to Jason. Where are you, Jason?
Yep. No, I think our mandate is timely and relevant. I look forward to the work. There's going to be a lot of things to dig into as we keep peeling the onion apart, but I'm pretty confident we'll work through it the best we can.
Great. Thanks, Jason. It's great to have you here at the table, because I know in running projects myself, I have literally had personally building projects, not here in Maryland, held up because it's like, yeah, we didn't get fire marshal sign off yet, right? And you come in at the end and you get all the blame, and yet, if we have you there earlier, then maybe we could figure out a better way.
Joe stole many of my speaking points on
that. Right. Okay. Julia.
No comment, thank you.
Okay, you're taking it in. Okay, and Danny. Donnie. Sorry.
Yes, no, glad to be here. And as you stated, it's a lot that we are taking on, and I live by a philosophy, don't want to be right, I want to get it right. So as we take on all of these responsibilities, just making sure we manage our own expectation as well as our client's expectation. As Louis stated, he's receiving calls of, so just managing those 2 expectations. Yeah.
We do. I think we want to be aggressive and get things done, but at the same time, let's not overpromise.
Yeah.
So, Suzanne.
Really resonate with what Marcy talked about, being customer focused and really make it easier for the people that we're trying to serve our employees, but really at the end of the day, that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Joe, closing thoughts?
No, excited to engage. I think if anybody wants to help us with our root cause issue, we'll take it in all fans. supporters. Good night, you too, Jake.
Great, Lewis,
I have nothing to add further, but I'll defer to Secretary Comer.
Secretary Coker.
I was going to defer to our, this time I'll take it. Glad to be here. Just wanted to demonstrate our support, but Luis is going to be leading our effort from here and with hands.
Secretary, I'm so grateful that you did come to this
this is
first meeting
important
to see what we were trying to accomplish here and what we're up to so that we can be collaborating on this. Yep. Perfect. Thank you. On to Josh, David, if you're going to be the permanent one, let me know.
I'll have to talk to Josh.
Josh, but we welcome you. So,
No, thank you. And so my first task is to talk to Josh and find out how we're going to go forward. But I have much better understanding, great meeting of what we're up against. I think the other thing for me is to, regardless of whether Josh or I are sitting there from here on out, is our staff and whether we have the right staff and whatever additional staff we need to get engaged.
Great. Thank you. And over to Mike.
Yes. Guys.
Get health at the table. We got it. We'll work on getting health at the table. Tunji, anything you'd like to add as part of our closing?
Well, not much. I guess I'll just express appreciation on behalf of Governor. I know that this is something that's extremely important to him. I personally have been in meetings where I've witnessed folks that either want to develop or expand here in Maryland, and they always cite permitting as an obstacle and how long it takes. It's something that the governor has said is that, hey, I've got a permitting council that's going to figure it all out. And to Lewis's point, yeah, like there are folks that hear that and think we're going to come up with the solution. And I know it's easier said than done. So just expressing the thanks there and acknowledging that it's going to be a lot of work. I think we're still at the point where we're trying to diagnose the issues and see where things are hung up and see where we can be more efficient. But I have confidence in this group, and I know that it's something that's very important to the governor, and it's something that he does expect to see some kind of results on. So just
no pressure.
Appreciation to everyone there. No pressure. Yeah.
Thank you, Tucci. Really appreciate you being here representing the governor's office. It's really important to us. So let me just close this out because we are at time. This is complex, hard stuff. We know that. And I think you all feel it every day. And yet, I think it's expressed by many, we have to crack this nut because it is so fundamental to our ability to achieve this, growth of the economy. And so we are a small but mighty team, as the saying goes. And if we don't try to solve everything, but at least take a huge bite out of the apple over the next year, I think we can really be on a path towards this particular issue. And I'm grateful to all of you because I'm going to need all of your help. This is a collaborated, coordinated effort. I see myself as the facilitator, the lead to sort of help bring it together, but you all are the experts around the table in the trenches on most of these things. And I just am someone who has experienced it from the other side as a developer. So I know that pain also. And I hope that we can have this level of engagement ongoing throughout the year because I'm going to need it. So thank you. Anything we can do for you, let us know. I also want to say how much I appreciate the in-person. So much easier. So, in terms of the future meetings, we are going to continue to do in person. If there's anything we can do to support you, if you're coming from another meeting, if you want to do a call or another meeting from here, we have space to accommodate that. Just to make it easier for you to try to make this in-person work, because I think it will be so much more important to our success by being here together. So stay tuned. You'll probably hear from either Sylvia or Darius or Melanie. But let us know what we can need or any thoughts you may have following the meeting. And we are 3 minutes over time, so we did pretty well. Thank you all. Thanks for being